Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Elena, and today I wanted to share 9 side hustle ideas that I have personally tried and tested. I wanted to talk about the pros and cons, as well as the skills required. Whether you're someone who knows that the 9 to 5 is not for you and you're trying to find another way to support yourself financially, or maybe you are just looking to make a little extra money on the side, I think it's safe to say that almost all of us have considered a side hustle at one point or another. The problem is there are so many side hustle ideas out there, so many possibilities that we could explore, and you can find people succeeding in each and every one of them. It's also not uncommon for those who have become really successful with a particular side hustle and turned it into a business to then also start mentoring and coaching other people on how to do the same, which is totally fine. It makes these businesses more accessible, more easy to learn, and easier for new people to start. But what bothers me is when people promote these different side hustle ideas and often come along with the message of anyone can do this, you can do this too, I'm not special, all you need is the right formula that I teach in my course, which, could very well be true. Theoretically, a lot of these things are things that anyone can do, including you. But what we forget is that we all have different personalities. We all have different skill sets, different things we enjoy or don't enjoy, things we are naturally better or gifted at. When you factor all of that in with the fact that you are also not an emotionless robot, I don't know if this message of anyone can do it is necessarily all that true anymore. The reason this bothers me so much is that people can be so convincing in making certain side hustles seem so appealing, like they're gonna answer all of your life problems, and we can really get sucked into investing our, time and money and energy into something that might not actually be right for us, and also might not actually lead us to the success that we've been sold. The value of matching your unique skills, strengths, interests to the side hustle that you're pursuing, or any work that you're doing at all, I think is so underrated. I think the part of the reason this isn't talked about a lot is because that obviously does not serve the marketing message of a lot of the people who are creating these coaching programs or courses or whatever else that promote these side hustles. Obviously, if you were to tell someone that this is not for people who have XYZ qualities, then you are automatically alienating those people from the possibility of buying your product. So it really is up to you, the consumer, to be the judge of that for yourself, to develop the self-awareness, to do the self-reflection, to have the self-honesty, to look at all these different potential side hustle options, learn about what it might take to make it successful, and then ask yourself, is this truly the right opportunity for me? It's been a big reoccurring lesson in my life that just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that applies to starting businesses or side hustles just as much as anything else. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to go through these 9 side hustles in the order that I have personally tried them, just because that kind of makes sense along with my journey, and I'm going to share what I learned as I was going through each of them in the order that I learned them in. Side hustle number 1, blogging. This definitely doesn't seem to be as much of a popular option as it was, say, maybe 10 years ago or so, but that doesn't mean it's not still a viable option. I started a blog in 2015 after watching a documentary called The True Cost that was about all the ethical and environmental issues in the fashion industry, and I was so deeply moved by it that I thought I would start a blog all about ethical and sustainable fashion. I actively ran that blog for about 3 to 3.5 years. It no longer exists, but it was a lot of fun while I was doing it, and it truly was the starting point of my online journey. Now, the skills you need to be successful as a blogger definitely include writing, of course, SEO or search engine optimization, which basically means that you are writing and structuring your website in a way that makes it easier for people who are searching for that kind of stuff to find you on platforms like Google. Now, if that's not a skill you currently have, that's totally okay. It was pretty easy to at least get the basics of it down to a point where my blog was growing and was getting found for certain search terms on Google. So this is definitely a skill you can learn and develop. Pinterest would be something really good to learn more about because a really large amount of blog traffic can come from Pinterest. I think when I was running my blog, about 80% of my traffic came directly from Pinterest. Photography, having an eye for visuals, especially if you are taking your own photography to put on your blog, especially if it's like more personal and lifestyle based, and basic web design. There's a lot of platforms out there to help you with this. this, so you don't have to be super techie, but you do have to be willing to learn a little bit and be able to put things together. One of the biggest pros I think I see with the blogging route is that there are so many possibilities and areas to expand once you kind of get into it and build up a name for yourself. There's a lot of ways to monetize, from affiliates to sponsored posts to ads to doing influencing, which we'll talk about in a bit, even expanding to sell merch or digital products. There is so much that you could do once you have the traffic and attention on your blog. It's great for writers, and I would say it's also great for people who do have a bit more of a target and niche that they operate within rather than something kind of more generic. It's a lot easier to build a name for yourself when you are known as the go-to person for something specific. The cons of blogging is that it can definitely take a lot of time to build up your readership, to build up your blog traffic to the point where you are able to, you know, get sponsored and things like that, or to make any kind of sustainable income off of affiliate links and ads. I also found that for me, eventually things did start to get a little monotonous and repetitive over time. You do eventually kind of learn a bit about what type of blog posts do best. A lot of the time it's like listicles, like top 8 whatevers or 5 things to know about whatever. And for me, it was really hard to just feel creative when I knew I kind of had to stick to these templates to have the best reach for my blog to continue getting traffic and getting the kind of attention that I wanted. You do eventually kind of turn into a bit of a media company, and it's all about getting eyeballs on your stuff, which means sometimes you may feel pressured to blog about things that maybe you don't want to, or just getting bored with the topics. Side hustle number 2 that kind of I built off of the blogging thing was influencing. When I say this, I mean more so like partnering with brands to like post on your social media, on Instagram or wherever, and getting paid to share about brands. The skills you would need for this is definitely photography, videography. Doesn't mean you have to be super professional, but knowing how to do that and have a bit of a style developed in that is definitely going to be helpful and help you stand out from everyone else trying to be an influencer. You're definitely going to need some confidence, being able to step outside your comfort zone, to talk to the camera and take a lot of photos, and just generally be willing to put yourself out there. Writing, speaking, using words, communicating is really important, because that's kind of what you're doing. Your job is to communicate the value of certain brands or products to your audience, and to do so in an authentic way. And last but not least, organization I'd say is super important. I mean, if you have like a manager or someone helping you with that, then maybe not as much, but in the beginning stages, especially if you're doing everything yourself, keeping on top of your inbox, tracking things, tracking payments, tracking brand deadlines, all that kind of stuff is also a really big part in what establishes you as being a professional in the industry, because a lot of people are not. Pros, of course, everyone loves some free products. Even better when you start getting paid to review and try things out and share about them. What's nice is that you don't even really have to be that big of an influencer to get started today. Micro-influencers are huge, and brands actually enjoy partnering with smaller influencers a lot of the time. Even back in the day when I started, I got my first free product, I think just a few months after I started my blog, and I had less than 1,000 Instagram followers at the time, I believe. So you really don't need that much to get started, as long as you know how to do it. This does also offer you the opportunity to expand to be a bit more of a lifestyle brand, as opposed to being super niche, which is really nice for people who are creative and don't really want to be boxed in. You kind of get to build a brand around you and your personality, which is not always the case with many businesses, and allows for a lot of your personal creativity to shine through as well. The cons is that no matter what anyone else tells you, it is definitely harder to grow on Instagram now than it was even 5 years ago, definitely more than it was like 10 years ago. So that is something to keep in mind. TikTok might be another story. I think there's still a lot of potential there, but the kind of original boom of the influencer era is kind of fading. There also can be a bit of pressure to feel like you have to work with brands that you don't actually know or like or support that much just to gain your experience, get free products, make some money. So it does take some integrity to be able to stick with that. And something that I didn't particularly enjoy when I was doing a little bit of this, especially because I was doing it in the kind of sustainability niche, I was talking about minimalism, ethical consumption, etc., is that being an influencer can really feel like you're just promoting a lot of consumerism consumerism a lot of the time, and you're constantly like telling people to buy things or just like sharing things with the hope that they buy things. And you might be encouraging people to buy things that they don't actually need. And if you are someone with a bit more of a minimalist philosophy and not as consumeristic, then that can sometimes rub you the wrong way a little bit. I also found it could be a little bit hard to shut off because your business is based around you, so it can be hard to like really disconnect, take a vacation without being on Instagram the whole time. Side hustle number 3 is freelancing. Obviously, this is a little broad. You could be a freelance web designer, a freelance bookkeeper, a freelance photographer or writer, social media manager, etc. I find that generally freelancers are creatives of some sort. And I think of all the side hustles on the list, this is the one that I've kind of spent the most time in. I've been doing freelancing on and off for many, many years now. And I've also been in a lot of rooms and events and communities with a lot of other freelancers as well. So I feel like I know this pretty well. And I've got to see who kind of tends to succeed over time in the freelancing world. Obviously, the skills you need are whatever skills it is that you are selling. If you're a web designer, then you need web design skills. But it is important to note that just being good at what you do is often not enough. But I've noticed as kind of being one of the key differentiating factors for freelancers who make it in a way and are successful and are able to slowly build their way towards full-time work is that they are really good at networking, at connecting with people, at building communities, and just getting to know people. Like, they are very good with that human connection and communication. So if you are planning on being a freelancer, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to go like networking events, but you do need to know how to connect with people, even if that's one-on-one, over phone calls, over Zoom calls, over emails even. Just building that relationship is going to be really important. Organization, productivity, time management, also really important things for freelancers because no one's looking over your shoulder to make sure you're getting things done. You are your own boss, so you need to be focused and self-motivated. Pros of freelancing is, of course, the flexible working conditions, being able to set your own rates, being in charge of your own workload. The cons being, you have to find your own clients, which depending on how good you are at that could be a struggle. And something I also didn't particularly love is that you really have to deal with your own contracts, your own billing. You have to chase down payments if people don't pay you on time, and dealing with all of that kind of behind the scenes admin can feel like it bogs you down a little bit if that's not something you're particularly good at or enjoy. The next side hustle is online coaching. This is often talked about more so as like a full-blown online business as opposed to a side hustle, but I thought I'd include it anyways in case you are in the boat of wanting to take your side hustle full-time in the long run. My personal experience with this is that shortly after getting into freelancing, I realized that actually I would really love to do coaching. It was something I was really interested in and wanted to explore. So I pivoted and I started to post about things like productivity, motivation, time management, habits, goal setting, etc. A lot of similar things that I talk about on this channel actually, so that's definitely still a strong interest of mine. And I began offering coaching services for those topics. Skills you would need to be an online coach include coaching, duh, which seems really obvious, but you would be surprised by how many coaches actually have no training in how to coach, which is different than like mentoring or teaching. Coaching skills include things like being a good listener, an active listener, having empathy, and also placing your clients' goals as a top priority, always, no matter what your personal goals or feelings about that might be. Emotional regulation, also very key as a coach, so that you don't let your own personal baggage, emotions, history, or traumas, etc., impact your client or the session, and also to be able to not carry that session with you, to be able to leave any of the emotions that you may have associated with that session in that space and kind of move on with your life when you are done. Self-development, unsurprisingly, is really key. You have to genuinely be into it and also be actively working on it for yourself. And similarly to freelancing, being able to network, make connections, build a community is important. I would also add, this isn't a necessity because there are tons of coaches who don't even have social media platforms, but knowing how to market yourself on social media and also having some sales skills are really helpful. Pros of coaching, it has a lot of the same perks as freelancing, like working for yourself on your own time, etc. There is a possibility to make a pretty decent amount of money fairly quickly in the coaching industry. Coaching packages often start at like $1,000 to $2,000 even for beginner coaches. And so if you are able to sell a few packages a month, that already gives you a pretty good starting point. This is also a quality over quantity type of business, which is really nice, meaning you don't have to have a lot of clients. You don't necessarily need a huge audience or a lot of traffic to your website. It's also cool that this can very much be started and grown off of social media. Within coaching, things are often also very referral based. So once you kind of get the ball rolling, and if you're good at what you do, people are going to share and talk about you, and that can help build your business as well. Cons are you do need to find your own clients to start with, and when you are not well known, then that can be hard to do. And like freelancing, you do also need to manage your own contracts, billing, finances, etc., which can sometimes feel a little heavy. Next up, we've got Amazon FBA. If you haven't heard of this before, Amazon FBA stands for Fulfilled by Amazon. And basically how this works is you source and produce and manufacture your own products. You send them to the Amazon warehouse. You create the listing on Amazon to become an Amazon seller. And then once someone buys your product, Amazon takes care of all the shipping, all the handling, and dealing with returns and customer service and all that kind of stuff for you, which is pretty nice. Skills you would need for Amazon FBA are number one, being really good at like running digital ads and being able to analyze the numbers and the results and to tweak your ads to improve them and make them better. This is something I didn't really understand or know going into it, and I wish I did because I'm not a numbers person, but that is really, really important. It would also be beneficial to have some negotiation skills so that you can negotiate with your manufacturers, with your shipping companies, and I would say more than any other side hustle on this list, this type of business is going to require a lot of problem solving skills and patience. This is the one that has given me the most headaches and stress of everything else. So that might just be something to keep in mind. The pros of Amazon FBA is that once you get it started, it can be relatively passive, at least compared to a lot of other side hustles on this list. There is also potential for a good amount of income if you do succeed and manage to make your product super successful on Amazon. And if you are interested in creating physical products specifically, this could be an option to consider, especially if you are hoping to sell in high volumes quickly, as opposed to starting like a Shopify store or something like that, because you are putting your product out into a marketplace, Amazon, where there are so many people searching every day for products just like yours. So it's a good way of kind of getting in front of them right away and not having to like search for them and draw them into your own website. Cons, even though I said it's like relatively passive in comparison to some other things on this list, it's still not fully passive income. You do need to keep on top of your ads. You do need to be checking in, monitoring them, tweaking them, keeping that going. And it does require quite a bit of investment upfront to get this started, both in terms of time, energy, and money, because you do have to design, manufacture, and produce your products that you're selling, and you have to purchase them from the manufacturer and ship them over to, you know, Amazon USA for storage. And that's, you know, like thousands and thousands of dollars potentially that you would have to invest before making a single dollar back. I would also say for me, this is a con. If you have a different personality type, then maybe this is a pro for you, but this is not the kind of business I would necessarily recommend for people who are more on the creative side like I am. It was really fun to do the design and creation and ideation of the product, but then once it's out there, a lot of what you're doing is just analyzing. And if you are more of an analytic type of person and a numbers type of person, that could be great for you, but if you are more right-brained and creative, then probably not. Next up, we've got podcasting. Some might argue that this isn't even really like a side hustle, maybe because it doesn't really make you money right away, which is true, but it's also the case with blogging, so I thought I would just include it here anyways. Skills you would need for podcasting are writing, scripting, speaking, obviously. I think it is also beneficial to have a good amount of confidence and self-belief and just believing that you have things that are worthy of sharing and saying. If you lack confidence in that, especially if you're doing a lot of solo episodes, that could really be a bit of a setback and hold you back from doing what you need to do and being successful at it. If you are doing more kind of like interview style podcasts and having guests on, then of course you need to have good interview skills, which means being able to be a good listener, unravel the story, story, pull the good information out of them, and present things in an enticing and relevant way to your audience. And of course, audio editing. I used GarageBand for my podcast, so it doesn't have to be anything crazy, totally learnable, or you can always outsource that, but it is something that you're going to need to think about. Pros of podcasting are that it can be a really fun way to express yourself. It's also a great way to create content for your audience without relying on algorithms in order for them to find it. Once someone subscribes to your podcast, there's a good chance that they will see your podcast on their podcast page, as opposed to social media sites like Instagram, where even if someone follows you, they could be following hundreds of other people and not see your stuff. There's also no visuals required, so if that's not your thing, or you don't want to have to put yourself together to present information, that could be a plus. And podcasts are also really great if you're having guests on your show and stuff, to build your network, make connections, and get to know a lot of other people in your industry. Cons are, like I mentioned, this might not be the best option for those who want to monetize really quickly, because it can take time to get to the point where you are able to offer ads and sponsorships. Editing can also be time consuming, especially if you're doing it yourself. Podcasting also might require a little bit of an upfront investment just for a good microphone, because audio is the only way that you're communicating. It needs to be really good audio. If it's not, people are highly unlikely to listen to it. I also would add that if you are a visual person and like aesthetic things like me, I've just found that podcasting can get a little bit unexciting and boring, and I lose my inspiration for it because there's no visual component to it. Even though YouTube is a lot more work, I feel like the work is more worth it and rewarding because I love the visual side of things. So that's just something to note. The next side hustle I tried was Etsy POD, or print on demand. Now, when we think of Etsy, we often think of handmade things that people make at home and then they send out and ship to you. But there's actually a lot of stuff on Etsy that is not handmade, is made by a manufacturer and then shipped directly to the consumer without the actual seller even seeing it. Basically, how this works on the seller's end is you would find a print on demand company to hook up to your Etsy seller profile, something like Printify or Printful. You would decide what kind of products you want to be putting out there. You would design the design that you want to go on that product, and then the company would be the ones to actually print your design on that mug or t-shirt or sweater or whatever. Unlike the Amazon FBA that we talked about, you're not actually buying any inventory or stock up front. The manufacturer prints the items on demand as someone buys them, which is really nice. One of the top skills that I would say would be really necessary if you want to get into this is being able to do research and market analysis, trend analysis for Etsy. There are a lot of different tools you can use for this, so you're not just guessing, but you do need to spend a lot of time to make sure that what you are putting out there is actually what people want and what's selling. Definitely helpful to have some basic design skills as well, but you don't have to be a pro graphic designer by any means. Just knowing being able to put together things that look good, having a general idea of what colors, how to space things, just generally having a natural knack for that is really helpful. And also SEO knowledge, because that's going to be a big part of how your products are going to be found and ranked within Etsy. Pros of this is that it's pretty easy and relatively simple to set up and get started with it. It's also a really nice way to sell physical products without having to actually deal with inventory and storage and paying for those products and then being stuck with them and trying to figure out how to sell them. It also requires very minimal investment up front. You can design things for free. You don't pay for any of the products until someone buys them, so until you're paid. As long as you're pricing everything correctly, then you're making a profit off of them. The only real upfront cost is the Etsy listing. I believe it's 20 cents per listing on Etsy, but 20 cents is very minimal. And also you can get 40 free listings. I have a link for you that you can check out in the description box below. So if you're interested in trying that out, you can get your first 40 listings for free. I did find Etsy print on demand to be quite fun, especially if you enjoy playing around and creating new designs. It gives you the opportunity to really experiment with a lot of different ideas, different designs, without having to actually invest into product development or into ordering products with a certain design. The cons are that depending on what your products are, it can be a little bit seasonal. So obviously towards the holidays, there could be this big boom of sales, but then could get really quiet. So it's not necessarily the most stable, but there's ways to mitigate that. That's just something to know, that Etsy can be a bit of a seasonal thing. Because doing this is actually quite simple, it can be a little bit repetitive and monotonous over time to just put up the listings and kind of go through the step-by-step process. It also requires a high volume of sales for you to be able to start making a decent income off of it. And I've heard it said within the Etsy POD world that generally you need to have at least like 100 to 200 listings on your store in order to start seeing consistent sales. So if you have a lot of ideas, that's great, but also that's a lot of time spent putting up a lot of different listings to get started. I would also say if you're a bit more of like an artsy type of person and you want to like share your art with the world, you can't get too attached to your designs. Many will just not get a lot of interest and will not sell. So you have to be okay with kind of like following certain design trends and what people are gravitating towards and using that to guide you, as opposed to like sticking really hard to your unique artistic vision. A con if you are thinking of physical products as a business is that with this, your product won't inherently be like super unique because it's just your design being printed onto an existing product that is probably very similar to all the other products. For example, a lot of the like sweatshirts and t-shirts that you see on Etsy, a lot of them are the same style, like from Gildan or Bella or whatever. If you do like mugs or hats, a lot of them are from the similar places, the print on design places that everyone else is using. So you really differentiate yourself with the design and what's going on the product, not the product itself. Next up, we have YouTube. I'm obviously a little biased towards this one because obviously I'm doing this on YouTube right now, but for good reason. So let's talk about the skills first of all. Videography and video editing goes without saying. I'd say, you know, just creativity in general goes a long way on YouTube. There is a lot of stuff on YouTube, so you do need to be creative and find ways to help yourself stand out. On-camera confidence, if you are doing videos that are like this or vlogs where you are showing your face and talking to the camera, then having some on-camera confidence is really important. Of course, if that doesn't exist yet, don't worry, that builds over time. The reason I feel pretty comfortable doing this right now is because I have had years and years of showing up on video in different ways, in different formats, from Instagram stories and reels to doing Facebook Lives at one of my old jobs. So, you know, this comes with practice and it comes with time, but having that is definitely going to be helpful. I will also say that there's something to be said for being able to push through discomfort when you're growing on YouTube, pushing through the self-doubt, being willing to look a little silly, being willing to put videos out there that maybe you're not even necessarily very proud of because your skill level does not yet match the vision that you had for that video. So it does require an ability to kind of, you know, humble yourself, put your ego aside, and be able to just see the final vision and work towards that even if you're not there yet. Pros with YouTube is that there is a low barrier to entry. If you've looked into this before, then I'm sure you have heard many creators saying you don't need much to start. You can start with your iPhone. And right now I am shooting on a camera just because I happened to have one already when I started this channel. But when I go out and I'm like vlogging in public and things like that, I'm just using my phone. A lot of people even shoot sit down videos like this using their phone. When it comes to editing, someone was asking me the other day about this. I literally just use iMovie. I don't use anything fancy yet. Would love to invest in it once I get monetized. But to get started, you really don't need much, which is great. I also love that YouTube gives a huge opportunity for freedom of expression and creativity. I also feel like there are really good monetization opportunities, and the money that you can make off of YouTube is pretty significant. Obviously, people also do like brand sponsorships and things like that, but on the actual YouTube side, I think it's really cool that you just get paid to create the videos and the money comes obviously from the ad revenue, but you don't actually have to be partnering with a brand and promoting any specific product in order to get paid, and I think that's really cool. And also, I mean, this could just be me, but I just think it's a lot of fun. I feel like I'm not really working, like even when I'm editing, I just feel like it's a lot of fun and it feels a lot less like work than a lot of other things on this list. Again, that could just be how I personally feel about it. There may be other things on this list that to you feel less like work and more like fun. So do those things. I think it's important to pay attention to what we actually enjoy doing when we're choosing a side hustle. Now, the cons of YouTube are that it can be very time consuming because not only are you scripting your videos and then sitting down to film them, but then also spending hours and hours editing them, unless you have an editor, which is great, but when you're getting started, you probably won't. I also find that it just requires a lot of like thought and effort, especially if you're trying to continuously improve your videos, you're trying to grow, you're trying to get monetized. It can just be really like exhausting and overwhelming to constantly be thinking about all the ways that you can make it better and there are so many ways to improve and other creators are so amazing. Yeah, sometimes it can just feel like a lot. And I do think it can also just take some time to like find your spot in the world of YouTube. You do have to consider the algorithm a little bit, but I do think that the YouTube algorithm, it makes more sense than like Instagram's algorithm, for example. But there is still a part of it that just feels like, are you just gonna strike gold and for some reason YouTube is going to choose your one video to pop off like it did for one of mine? It was like my third or fourth video ever, and I really have no idea why YouTube decided to show it to so many people, and I think a lot of you found me through that video, which is really cool. But sometimes it feels like things like that are just kind of out of your hand and are just luck, which is nice. But then sometimes you're like, how do I replicate that? And it can take some time to really like tease that apart and figure that out. Finally, the last side hustle I want to talk about today is about being a UGC creator. UGC stands for user generated content. I created a whole video where I walked through the UGC content that I create for Airbnbs. I'll link it either somewhere up here or in the description so you can check that out if you haven't seen it yet. What UGC basically means is that you are a content creator, so you're creating videos or sometimes photos for other brands for them to post on their platforms. So unlike an influencer who creates content for their own Instagram, TikTok pages, etc., for UGC, you are creating it for the brand to use on their pages. Skills you need for this, definitely video creation, filming, editing, sometimes you have to script things as well. Having social media skills in general is really important. Things like keeping up with trends and knowing how to capture attention online, and also understanding like the culture of different platforms so that you can kind of play into that and make your content more effective for the brand. This one might seem a little out there, but I would say that acting is actually a key skill for UGC creators as well, because you are ultimately creating content to sell something. Whether it's a product or you're going to an Airbnb and you're selling the experience, you are going to have to do a little bit of like playing pretend, acting, of showcasing you going around and doing certain things, or you having certain emotional reactions and like surprise and like whatever, right? I think we've all seen, you know, the different ads where people are showcasing big emotions, and so you do have to do a little bit of acting. Sometimes you will even have a script from a brand to read, and obviously you don't want to just sit there reading the script. You have to act as if you're naturally speaking that way. And I would say just in general, having the skill of being persistent, putting yourself out there, really like going after it and being a go-getter is really going to help you get started in the UGC world. The pros of being a UGC creator is that it can definitely be a lot of fun if you enjoy content creation. Not everyone does, but if you do, this is a lot of fun. You also work on your own time, you work from home. It's also nice because it's one of those things that you can kind of grow as much as you want, and you can keep it just a side hustle if you don't want that to be your full-time thing. It's a great like little add-on side hustle to add on to other things that you might be doing. You can also be a content creator without actually having to be like an influencer and having a audience to share with. Or if you are an aspiring influencer, then I feel like this is a great way to start dipping your toes in, to gain experience and practice. And I feel like that would make it easier for you to pitch to brands to work with as an influencer as opposed to just a content creator when you get to that level. Cons are that if you do want to start making a decent amount of money right away, then you might have to be a little less picky about the brands that you are working for. One of the reasons this would never really work for me as a full-time option is because I tend to just be picky of like the brands I want my face associated with. I don't know why, you know, I just don't want to create content for brands that I don't genuinely love and support or use. But with UGC, you know, there are a lot of opportunities out there, and if you don't really care so much about that, then there are a lot more options for you out there than there might be for someone who's a bit of a stickler like me. Another thing to note is that you may need to accept some gifted products in exchange for the work that you're doing when you're just starting out. I wouldn't do this too much, but it can be a good way to get started, get some experience, and build up your portfolio. And another con is that there is a lot of outreach at the get-go to get the ball rolling, to reach out to brands, to constantly craft your pitches and put yourself out there, get rejections, continue putting yourself out there. So that's just something to be aware of as well. Whew, wow. So those are the 9 side hustles that I have personally tried and tested. I hope you found this video helpful for getting an inside behind the scenes look on some of these side hustles and businesses. I feel like when people talk about them, they only talk about the great parts and the positives, but don't often mention the cons or why they might be difficult or who the business might be best suited for or not suited for. Like I said, each of these side hustles are things that theoretically anyone can do if they learn the ins and outs, but it's so important to consider together doesn't match your interests, your personality, your strengths, your skills, the type of lifestyle that you want? That's another question entirely, and I think it's really important to ask yourself that before you dive into anything. Now I'm curious to hear from you. Have you tried any of these side hustles? And if so, what did you think of them? Was there anything that surprised you that you didn't know going into it? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.